You are fighting the war, so Ukraine has to decide. It is your decision. We don't want to.
But we can fight for Crimea.
Perfect. We want to have these preconditions met first, and then being able to transfer our F-16s to you.
Ukrainians are faster.
Absolutely, but 6 to 8 months is extremely fast. No one has done it that fast before. Then it's not going to stop in Ukraine. We are directly threatened within the countries within the European Union, the NATO countries, by Russian aggression.
Kajsa Ollongren is a Minister of Defense of Netherlands, and Dutch support is vitally important for Ukraine now, especially because Netherlands are providing us first F-16 jets. And we will talk to her not only about this military support. Kajsa, good to see you here in Kiev, and thank you for supporting Ukraine. And my first question is, of course, about jets. So yes. We already have the first jet in Ukraine that you have brought?
Yes, well, I must confess it's a model of the F-16. I handed it to my colleague, the Minister of Defense, Alexei Resnikov, yesterday. But of course, it's the symbol of what we hope to achieve very soon, which is having trained Ukrainian pilots, trained Ukrainian technicians, and then being able to transfer our F-16s to you to strengthen your Air Force.
So those F-16s that are bigger than this model, when do you expect to have them in Ukraine?
Well, as soon as possible. But what does that mean? That means in May we decided that we would start the training. We are doing this jointly with Denmark and several other countries, and we need all that expertise. And it's also new, so the training has started, but we have to build it up so that you will have enough trained personnel to actually use the F-16s. Then, of course, also the infrastructure is very important. So here in Ukraine, you are working on having the right infrastructure for this very advanced weapon system and this advanced platform that can be very useful. And all the time we discuss, of course, with Washington, because they have to, it's an American system, they decide on the airplane, but also on the weapons. So we're doing this in a parallel process. We know it takes time. The assessment is the training 6 to 8 months.
Ukrainians are faster.
Absolutely, but 6 to 8 months is extremely fast. No one has done it that fast before. So I hope that is the time frame we are looking at. And in the meantime, we can prepare everything that we can also have the transfer ready.
I just try to understand, is there a theoretical possibility that we will have first F-16s this year, or it's already excluded?
Well, you know, from our side, from the Netherlands side, we want to have these preconditions met first. So know that we have the trained crews, know that we have the infrastructure in place, and that we have everything, not only the airplanes, but also the spare parts, also the weapons, etc. So we are really being realistic, looking at next year. Denmark, of course, decides for itself when the first transfer will be. But I think the main focus of all partners is to make it happen as soon as possible and to make sure that you have the capability you need for your air defense and for your Air Force.
How many of F-16s are you ready to provide to Ukrainian Air Force? A few more details about F-16 supply. By now, it was not clear how many of platforms would arrive to Ukraine. It is a kind of public knowledge that the Netherlands possess 42 jets, but not all of them should come to Ukraine. It was publicly declared. But this interview is the very first one when Netherlands have explained why they do not supply all jets they have in their possession. So let's listen to the minister.
It's really simple. We are transitioning from F-16s to F-35. And because of the war in Ukraine, we at a certain moment in time have decided not to sell them or to do something else with them, but to have them available. So part of those airplanes will be used for the training of the Ukrainian pilots, and the others we will transfer to Ukraine. So in general, my Prime Minister has also said it, we have 42 of them. Part will be for the training and the rest of it is for Ukraine.
If you provide training and then Ukrainian pilots are trained, why do you need to leave them in Netherlands?
Because you always continue, it's not going to be necessarily in the Netherlands. We're looking at a training center in Romania. They will be used where the training is held. But you always have to continue the training. For as long as you use F-16s, you will train new pilots. You will have the need for also this training center. We have always done that also with our pilots for 40 years. So you cannot train just one batch and then stop the training. So it has to be a continuous process.
We know that these jets are not of the highest, let's say, the most modern generation. And of course, those F-35 that you would need are better, but even inside F-16 family, there is a possibility to upgrade. Do you consider an option that those planes would be upgraded before they are sent to Ukraine?
That's a very technical question, because we have been flying with F-16 for a very long time, but of course we've also been doing upgrades. So in the F-16 families, you have all kinds of different upgrades and let's say standards. But if you know the Netherlands a little bit, you know that we are very careful about these things and that we always do the necessary upgrading. So we will always provide you with the best possible upgrade.
I just try to understand. We know what kind of F-16s are now in your air forces, and there is a chance to have better radars. Is this considered that within this month you would have a new upgrade, or those planes would be provided as they are now?
I think it's difficult to say. That's really a technical discussion. I think our technicians and our military are looking into that also together with the Americans to make sure that once we can transfer the airplanes that you get what you have trained on and know how to use them also in the fighting situation.
I'm a person who used to cover Netherlands for a referendum. And I remember that time your party was pro-Ukrainian.
Absolutely.
But Netherlands in general did not show itself that much pro-Ukrainian. No. What have changed now? Why are you providing us with so many support?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all because we feel very strongly about international rules and about territorial integrity. And that aggression can never be rewarded. That is one reason, The Hague being the international capital of law. The other reason, I think, also is a strong connection to what is happening now to your country. We know it from the Second World War. We were also occupied then by the Nazis. And that is something that is in our history and in our blood. And I think a third reason, sadly, is also the MH17 that has brought our two countries together. When the airplane was shot down, Ukraine was very, very helpful for us to get the people back. And that has formed a connection. So, and the support in the Netherlands for Ukraine now is very strong. It is very wide societal, also wide politically. I think after a year and a half after the large-scale invasion, it is still very strong. And I can say even that if elections are coming up, I don't think that whatever the outcome will be, that it will change the strong support that there is in the Netherlands for Ukraine.
That indeed was my next question, and I have to dig in it deeper. You have elections this autumn. Are you completely sure that in no outcome, in no way, F-16 deal wouldn't be reverted?
I cannot imagine that because there is really wide support. In our parliament there are more than 20 parties. There are only a few that do not support it. But the very wide range does support this. And even after our political crisis deciding on having new elections, this government said, supported also by Parliament, it will not affect our support for Ukraine. So we are a caretaker government, but I don't feel like a caretaker Minister of Defense because I have and will continue the support for Ukraine, and the elections will not change that. So, of course, we are a democratic country, so we have to wait, of course, for the vote and what the outcome is. But I am quite certain that it will not change our attitude towards Ukraine.
And not only regarding F-16s, but also regarding our other military supply?
No, the military supply, I think we have shown also, we are approaching 2 billion euros of materials that we've already sent, weapons, also other in-kind medical supplies, etc. That will also continue because we know that Ukraine must keep the fight up as long as the Russian aggression continues. And we also know that, of course, you depend upon your partners. And I think we are proud to be an important partner to Ukraine, and we intend to continue with that.
Returning to the referendum issue, that time one of key reasons for that was our relations with the EU in terms of association agreement, but also there was a kind of layer which was about security. For those who did not follow in details Ukraine-EU relations back in 2016, that year in Netherlands there was a referendum organized by pro-Russian forces that have finally blocked ratification of the association agreement between Ukraine and the EU. It took enormous efforts of both sides to overcome that blockade. But anyway, that time public opinion was strongly against close cooperation, and also that referendum was against security cooperation between Ukraine and European states. Now, 7 years after, we see completely different Netherlands, and that is what Minister explains. Now Ukraine is about to start negotiations with the EU, and the decision will be taken after elections in Netherlands. And we are about to be a NATO member, I hope so. How do you see mainstream Netherlands opinion? Would Ukraine be in the EU and in NATO as soon as possible?
I think so, because politically we have taken that step. We have welcomed Ukraine as a candidate for the European Union. And in Vilnius, we have also decided upon the future for Ukraine and NATO. And I think also seeing this war, it has been also a wake-up call for many European countries that we have a large-scale war back in the heart of Europe that has made people realize that Ukraine belongs to the European family, that you share our European values, that you share our common goals of democracy, rule of law, and things like that. And that is the reason, I think, that at the time, there were perhaps questions. I don't think it was really about Ukraine. I think Ukraine was perhaps a country that we didn't really know that well. Now we know what you are fighting for. And we feel a very strong bond. So the future of Ukraine in the European family is part of the European Union. And now also at the NATO table in the NATO-Ukraine Council is a big step.
Don't you believe that Ukraine will be a NATO member sooner than the EU member?
We will see. I don't know.
But your opinion, assessment?
Well, I welcome Ukraine in both organizations, and I think now we have to take it step by step. An important step is having the Ukraine NATO Council. And for the EU, yes, of course, there are all kinds of conditions to be met. But we also see that while you are at war, your parliament is working on new legislation to prepare for EU membership. So I wouldn't dare to say how fast you will get there. But I do see that Ukraine is very ambitious. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's going to be much faster than other countries that we've seen entering the European Union.
At the same time, we understand that this kind of support that we enjoy from many countries, including Netherlands, cannot last forever. People get tired. This war somewhere, we don't know where this Ukraine is. Okay, Dutch nation is very trade-focused nation, people do know, but anyway, it's further than even Poland. Why should we pay for them? And the war can last for years. How can we tackle that fatigue? And do you see that this fatigue is a kind of developing now?
I don't see it now. But I think it's something we have to be aware of in all our societies. But if someone would say to me now, it's taking so long and is there so much money going to this? I would say, well, look at it from the other way. If someone is really tired of the war, it's the Ukrainians themselves, because they have to fight the war. They have to deal with this Russian aggression. They are losing people. They are feeling unsafe because of air attacks. And the second thing is that if Russia is not stopped, but if Russia is rewarded by their aggression, then it's not going to stop in Ukraine. And it's not going to stop in this part of Europe. Then at some point, also we are directly threatened within the countries within the European Union, the NATO countries, by Russian aggression. And that is why we must do everything we can to make sure that you keep it up and that Russia doesn't win.
Yeah, you believe that Russia can even attack NATO members?
Well, I mean, in the end, you see what kind of regime there is in Russia now, very aggressive. with the sort of idea of revenge in going back to old times. If you look at the country that once was Soviet Union, the Tsarist Empire. And that means that the eastern part of NATO, the eastern part of the European Union, is directly threatened by that thought. And I think that is important that we keep stressing this. That it's not only a problem for Ukraine, it's a European problem and it's also a NATO problem.
And the last question, you are here for participation in the Crimean platform, which is an important event for us. And Crimea is Ukraine, and no one doubts. How do you see, should Ukraine return Crimea during this war? My answer is definitely yes, but I'm interested to hear you.
Yes, well, this is my third visit to Ukraine in 1 year time. And I say that to stress that we want to show our solidarity and our support for the Ukrainian cause. And the Ukrainian cause is, of course, to restore territorial integrity.
In full.
We have never recognized the annexation of Crimea. So it's that simple. If you look at what is Ukraine, it is Ukraine as it was when you became an independent country again in 91. That has not changed. That has not changed since 2014, not since 2022.
But there is no clear answer to my question, and I will explain why I'm so much interested in that. People in Ukraine are afraid that to some degree our Western partners would push us gently to some ceasefire, maybe later, maybe negotiations. This would not work. Ukrainian opinion is 90+% for returning all the territory during this war, but we don't see vocal support of this idea from our foreign friends.
Our support is your right to self-defense. Our support is your territorial integrity, recognized by many, many countries around the world. And we know where the borders were at the time. So for me, it's not a question. The only thing is that you are fighting the war. So Ukraine has to decide upon how long to fight. It is your decision. We don't.
But we can fight for Crimea.
Perfect.
We can. Don't you oppose it?
No.
I'm also asking that because, well, that's a difficult question, but I have to ask it because we know that F-16s would be limited, that we can only use them in some parts. For instance, we cannot attack military targets at Russian territory. So we see that some limitations are set by our Western partners.
Well, I think we have to be very careful about that because we are in the phase of deciding on conditions for the F-16s to be transferred. Conditions like the infrastructure, conditions like the training, and also conditions on the weapons and the use of it. We have not decided on the exact conditions, and it's also not only up to us. It's really also something where the United States has an important voice, and of course also Ukraine. But for me, it's very simple. When we provide weapon system platforms to Ukraine, we do that knowing that you use it for self-defense and that you respect also the rules that we fight by and that you fight by. As long as that is what you're doing, self-defense.
That means that we can use them in Crimea.
That means that we have not decided yet on the conditions, and that as long as it is within the definition of self-defense and restoring territorial integrity as we knew it before, then the military strategy is not for me to decide.
Thank you very much for that interview. Дякуємо всім, хто були з нами. Лишайтеся на каналі Європейської правди, каналі про НАТО, Євросоюз та роль України у світі. До побачення.